"We're going to die," one of the Navy SEALs said, staring at the windows like they were counting down his last minutes. Outside, the Alaskan storm was already swallowing the world. White-out snow, screaming wind, the helipad lights flickering like they were about to go out forever. Inside the military hospital, there were only 9 people left. 2 doctors, 2 nurses, 5 SEALs, and 2 of them were bleeding. The pilot was dead, taken by fever in the cold so brutal it killed faster than bullets. Every call for help failed. Radios were static. Cetones were dead. And even if they reached someone, no aircraft could fly into this storm. One SEAL laughed bitterly. "We're trapped. That's it." That's when the rookie nurse stepped forward. Ava, quiet, blonde, calm. "I can fly the Jayhawk," she said. The SEAL stared at her, then laughed harder until she looked at the team leader and said one sentence using a unit name that wasn't supposed to exist. And every Navy SEAL in that room went pale. Look, the first thing you need to understand is that it wasn't the snow that got to you. It was the sound. Alaska doesn't snow like in the movies, you know? It howls. The wind hit those hospital windows like actual fists, making the glass rattle in its frame like it wanted to come inside and join us. The power flickered twice, lights dimming just long enough to make everyone look up, heart skipping a beat. Then the generator caught, and the hallway went back to that harsh white glow. The kind that makes people look sick even when they're fine. It was past midnight. Night shift at St. Eldridge Military Hospital, this tiny outpost tucked into the frozen edge of nowhere. There were maybe 9 souls inside. 2 doctors, 2 nurses, and 5 Navy SEALs, who looked like they'd walked straight out of a nightmare and into fluorescent light. 2 of them were injured. Not dramatic movie injuries. The real kind. One had this deep gash under his ribs where the dressing was already soaking through. The other was pale, shivering, fighting to stay awake like sleep would take him somewhere he couldn't come back from. The rest stood in the hallway like guard dogs, rifles slung, eyes scanning corners out of habit. They weren't here for comfort. They were here because the storm had forced their helicopter down earlier, and now the storm had come back to finish the job. The SEALs tried every radio channel they had. Nothing. Just static. Someone pulled out a satellite phone like a last prayer. Dead. The backup battery pack? Useless. The wind outside was so thick it felt like it had weight. Even if a call went through, nobody could fly in this. Everyone in the building knew it. Nobody said it out loud at first because saying it made it real. The head doctor, Dr. Harmon, kept pretending everything was normal. He spoke too fast, gave orders that didn't matter, checked charts like charts could stop a blizzard. But I saw the way his hand shook when he reached for a pen. And I saw the way the SEAL leader watched him, expression flat, already calculating what it would take to keep everyone alive if the walls stopped being walls. Then one of the SEALs, tall, broad, face crusted with melted snow, looked down the hall toward the hangar access door and asked a question so casual it chilled the whole room. "Where's the pilot?" Nobody answered. The older nurse Mara glanced at the floor like she'd dropped something. Dr. Harmon cleared his throat. "He passed earlier." The SEAL leader's eyes narrowed. "Passed? How?" Harmon hesitated, and that hesitation said more than any report ever could. "Fever," he admitted. "Hypothermia complications. We tried..." The SEAL leader cut him off with a slow nod. Not anger, worse, acceptance. Like a man hearing the last bolt slide into place on a door he'll never open again. That's when the mood changed. The SEALs stopped moving like visitors and started moving like men preparing for a siege. They checked doors, they checked windows, they counted rounds. One of them dragged a heavy cabinet in front of the main entrance like it was routine. Dr. Harmon watched them with this wrong kind of pride, like they were security guards hired for the night. He didn't understand what I understood immediately. SEALs don't prepare like that unless they believe something is coming. Not just the storm, something else. something that uses storms as cover. The outpost was isolated, supply routes ran nearby, and in Alaska, there are people who move through whiteouts like they were born in them. I stayed quiet near the nurse's station, watching Ava. She was the youngest one there, the rookie, blonde hair pulled tight, light blue scrubs under a heavy winter parka that looked too big for her shoulders. Calm, blue eyes, no panic, no shaking hands. She was restocking gauze, checking IV fluids, counting morphine vials like this was just another shift. Like the world outside wasn't trying to erase the building off the map. The SEALs barely noticed her. One of them even muttered, not quietly enough, "Great, a rookie nurse. Perfect." Another snorted, "If this place goes down, she'll freeze in 10 minutes. Ava didn't react. She just kept working. But I saw her pause for half a second when the generator hummed too low. She listened to it the way pilots listen to engines. Then Dr. Harmon finally said what everyone had been circling. "We can't stay here." His voice cracked on the last word. "If the generator fails, if the heating dies, we won't last the night." The SEAL leader stared at him like he'd just arrived at the obvious 5 hours late. "There's nowhere to go," one of the SEALs snapped. "No planes can fly in this." Another SEAL, injured, leaning against the wall, laughed once, bitter. "So we wait, we freeze, or we get shot if someone finds us first." Nobody corrected him because nobody could. Even Mara looked like she might cry. That's when the SEAL leader exhaled hard and said it like a final sentence. "We're going to die here." Ava's head lifted, not dramatically, just enough to show she'd been listening the whole time. She walked forward, slow, steady, like she didn't need permission to enter the conversation. "There's a helicopter," she said. The SEALs turned toward her like she'd insulted them. The leader's eyes narrowed. "Yeah, there is, and the pilot is dead." Ava didn't blink. "Then we don't need the pilot." One of the SEALs barked out a laugh. "What is this? Some kind of motivational speech?" Another shook his head. "Sweetheart, this isn't TikTok. This is Alaska." Ava's voice stayed calm. "I can fly it." The hall went quiet for a full second. Then the laughter came harder, sharper, desperate. Because fear makes men cruel when they don't know where to put it. But Ava didn't flinch. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She just looked at the SEAL leader and said, almost casually, "I learned on a unit that didn't get pilots. We learned to take the controls ourselves." A pause, then she said it. "SEAL Team 9 Flight Cross Training." The laughter died instantly. The SEAL leader's face went blank. Not confused, not amused. Blank, like someone had just spoken a name that wasn't supposed to exist anymore. His breath caught, and for the first time all night, he looked afraid. Not of the storm, not of freezing, but of her. And in that moment, I realized the storm wasn't the real danger. It was what Ava's words had just brought back. The hallway stayed frozen after Ava said it, not because anyone believed her, because the name she dropped hit the SEALs like a flashbang in a small room. The leader's jaw tightened so hard, I saw the muscle jump near his ear. The injured one against the wall stopped breathing for a second, like his lungs forgot how. And then the skepticism came back, heavier this time, like anger wearing a mask. "SEAL, Team 9, one of them repeated slowly. "That unit doesn't exist." Ava didn't argue, she didn't smile. She just held his stare, calm as a monitor beep. "It existed," she said, "and it buried more people than the ocean." That was the first time the doctors truly looked at her, not like a rookie, like a locked door they'd been leaning on without realizing. The SEAL leader stepped closer. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His tone was controlled, the way men sound when they're trying not to break something. "What's your name, nurse?" "Ava." He watched her for a long second. "Last name?" She hesitated just a breath, and that tiny pause made the air feel sharp. "Ava Carter," she said. The leader's eyes narrowed, and I could tell he was searching his memory like a database. One of the other SEALs, younger, cockier, scoffed. "So what, Carter? You're saying you can just hop in a Black Hawk and fly out like it's Uber?" Ava's gaze slid to him, then to the hangar access door. "It's not a Black Hawk," she corrected. "It's a Jayhawk variant. And no, I can't fly out like it's easy. But I can fly out if the choice is die here." The injured SEAL coughed, and the sound was wet. Dr. Harmon looked like he wanted to say something, but couldn't find the courage to speak over the men with guns. That's when the generator stuttered. Not fully, just enough for the lights to flicker and the monitors to chirp. A soft, ugly dip in the hum that made every person in the building instinctively tense. The heating vents exhaled a breath of lukewarm air, and then nothing for a second. 1 second. That was all. But it was the kind of second that tells you the world is running out of time. Mara, the older nurse, whispered, "No, no, no, no!" Dr. Harmon rushed to the maintenance panel like he could fix it with his hands. The SEAL leader didn't move. He just stared at the ceiling like he was listening to the building's heartbeat. "How long do we have?" he asked. Ava answered before anyone else could. "If it drops again, the generator's going to fail within the hour. Then we'll lose heat. Then we'll lose lights. Then we'll lose people." She said it like she was reading weather, like she'd seen it before. The SEAL leader finally nodded once. "All right," he said. "Show me." They moved fast after that, but not in a messy way, in a disciplined way. The SEALs took positions without being told. One stayed with the injured men. 2 covered the main entrance. 1 checked the windows. The leader followed Ava down the stairwell toward the hangar corridor, boots thudding against concrete. Dr. Harmon tried to follow, but the SEAL leader held up a hand. "Doc, stay with your patients." It wasn't disrespect. It was triage. Harmon froze, swallowed, and stayed behind. Ava didn't look back. She walked like she already knew the route, like she'd walked it before in the dark. The corridor leading to the hangar smelled like oil and cold metal, and the wind scream got louder the closer they got to the outer doors. The SEAL leader leaned in slightly as they walked. "If you're lying," he said quietly, "I won't have time to be polite about it." Ava didn't blink. Good. Neither will the storm. The hangar doors were half frosted over, edges rimmed in ice. The Jayhawk sat there like a sleeping animal. Matte, dark paint, rotors still, medical evac markings on the side. A dead pilot's jacket was folded on a chair near the maintenance table, and that small detail made my stomach turn. The SEAL leader stared at it for a second too long. Then he forced his eyes back to Ava. "You ever flown in this?" he asked. Ava walked up to the helicopter and ran her gloved hand along the fuselage like she was greeting something familiar. "I've flown worse," she said. The SEAL leader let out a humorless breath. "Worse than an Alaskan ice storm?" Ava finally looked at him. "Worse than weather? Worse than people?" And for the first time, I saw a flicker of something in his expression. Not trust, not yet, but recognition. Like he'd met that kind of calm before, on nights that didn't end clean. Ava climbed up onto the side step, pulled herself into the cockpit, and the SEAL leader followed her in. The cockpit lights were dead. The batteries were low. The whole helicopter felt like it was holding its breath. Ava reached for switches like she'd done it 1,000 times. She checked fuel. She checked hydraulics. She checked the engine intake for ice buildup. The SEAL leader watched her hands, and I swear he wasn't watching for competence. He was watching for muscle memory. He wanted to see if her body knew the machine before her mouth did. "What's your flight time?" he asked. Ava didn't answer immediately. She flipped a breaker and a small panel light blinked alive. "Enough," she said. He leaned closer, voice low. "That's not an answer." Ava's jaw tightened. "They didn't log my hours. They buried them." The SEAL leader stared at her, and I felt the temperature drop inside the cockpit even though it was already freezing. "Who trained you?" he asked. Ava paused for the first time. Then she said a name, not a famous name, not a dramatic one, just a simple one. And the SEAL leader's face changed so fast, it was like someone punched him. His eyes went glassy for half a second, then hard. "He's dead," he whispered. Ava didn't look away. "I know. He died making sure I could land." Before the leader could respond, the hangar door shuddered, not from wind, from impact. A dull boom echoed down the corridor. Then another. The SEAL leader's head snapped toward the sound. His hand went to his rifle instinctively. Ava didn't flinch. She just kept working, flipping another switch, trying to coax power from a dying system. The boom came again, closer this time, like someone testing the door. The SEAL leader keyed his radio. "Contact. Static," he tried again. Nothing. The storm was swallowing every signal. He looked at Ava, and for the first time his voice carried real urgency. "Tell me we can get this bird up." Ava's fingers moved faster. "If the battery holds, if the fuel lines aren't frozen." Another crash hit the outer doors, and this time I heard metal bend. Ava's eyes lifted to the windshield, and she said something so calm it scared me more than panic would have. "They found us." The SEAL leader dropped out of the cockpit and moved to the hangar window slit. He peered through the frost. Outside, in the whiteout, shapes moved. Dark silhouettes. Not military, not rescue. Too coordinated, too many. He couldn't see faces, but he could see rifles. He could see the way they spread out, using the storm like cover. Like they'd done it before. Smugglers. The kind that used remote storms to move contraband and disappear. The kind that didn't care if a hospital existed in their way. The SEAL leader turned back toward where Ava was, and the tone of his voice changed from testing a rookie nurse to speaking to someone who might be the only chance left. "How fast can you spin up?" he asked. Ava looked at the dead panels, the weak battery, the frozen air. Then she looked him in the eye. "Fast enough, but you're going to have to buy me time." And right, as she said it, the hangar door buckled inward with a scream of steel, and the first armed shadow stepped inside. The hangar door didn't open like a normal door. It failed. Metal screamed, hinges snapped, and the storm shoved the slab inward like it wanted inside too. The first smuggler stepped through with his rifle up, goggles iced at the edges, head turning slow like he was tasting the room. 2 more followed, then a 4th. Moving clean, spaced out, not panicked. These weren't drunk idiots looking for pills. They were here for something specific. The SEAL leader didn't shout. He didn't give a heroic warning. He simply raised his rifle and fired 2 controlled shots, so sharp they sounded like a judge's gavel. The first smuggler dropped. The second spun and tried to return fire, but the SEAL was already shifting position, using the helicopter's landing skids as cover, like he'd been born behind them. Ava stayed in the cockpit. Her hands didn't shake. She flipped a switch, watched a weak panel light blink, and whispered under her breath, "Come on, don't die on me now." The firefight turned the hangar into a nightmare in seconds. Bullets sparked off concrete, chewing little bites out of the floor. One of the smugglers fired high and hit the overhead lights. Glass rained down like glittering ice. The SEALs moved like they'd rehearsed this exact room, even though they hadn't. 2 of them pushed left toward the maintenance bay. 1 stayed near the hangar entrance to prevent a full rush. The injured SEAL, the one who could barely stand, dragged himself behind a fuel crate and still managed to cover the corridor with his rifle. Like pure spite was holding his spine together. Ava heard every shot through the thin cockpit glass, and she hated herself for the thought that slipped in. If they die, I'll be alone in here. She shoved it away and forced her eyes back to the instrument panel. Battery voltage low, starter struggling, wind rocking the bird like a giant hand. She tried again. The engine coughed once, twice, then nothing. Ava climbed out of the cockpit for half a second, jumped down and ran to the maintenance table. Her glove slapped against the cold metal as she yanked open a drawer, grabbing a de-icing spray can and a small toolkit. She moved fast, but not messy, like she'd done this in the dark before. The SEAL leader caught sight of her and barked, "Nurse, get back in the bird!" Ava snapped back without even looking at him. "If I don't clear the intake, we're not flying anywhere." That was the first time anyone heard her raise her voice. It wasn't fear, it was authority. She sprinted to the engine intake panel, popped it, and the wind punched her in the face so hard, it stole her breath. Ice had crusted inside like a choke collar. She sprayed, scraped, and worked with fingers that were already going numb. Behind her, a smuggler slipped around the right side of the hangar, trying to flank the SEALs. Ava didn't see him, but the K9 handler SEAL, yes, the one who'd been quiet all night, did. He fired once. The smuggler folded. Then the SEAL shouted something that made Ava's stomach drop. "They're not just coming in, they're circling the hospital." Outside, the storm hid everything, but it couldn't hide sound. More boots, more shouting. The smugglers were splitting, some hitting the hangar, some moving toward the main hospital wing. Ava's mind did the math instantly. 2 doctors, 2 nurses, 5 SEALs, 2 injured, a generator that was already dying, and now armed men inside the building. Dr. Harmon and Mara were up there with patients who couldn't even run. Ava's chest tightened, but she forced her breathing down. Panic wastes oxygen. Panic makes mistakes. She snapped the intake panel shut and ran back toward the cockpit. But the SEAL leader stepped in front of her for a second, rifle up, eyes blazing. "Tell me the truth," he said. "Right now. Are you actually trained to fly this?" Ava met his stare. "I'm trained to land it, which is the part that kills people." That answer hit him like a cold slap. He didn't like it, but he believed it. A burst of gunfire hammered the far wall, and a bullet ripped through a hanging tarp inches from Ava's head. She ducked and slid into the cockpit again. The SEAL leader shouted orders to his team, and suddenly 2 of them peeled off toward the hospital corridor. They weren't abandoning the hangar. They were preventing a massacre upstairs. Ava watched them go and felt something ugly in her throat, because she knew what that meant. Fewer guns here. Less time. She shoved the starter again. The engine coughed harder this time, like it wanted to live. The rotors twitched, just a twitch. Then the whole system shuddered and died again. Ava slammed her palm against the console, not in rage, but in focus. "Come on," she whispered. "Please." She reached down and pulled out the emergency checklist, flipping it open like she was back in training. Her eyes scanned lines of text. Then she froze. 1 line, 1 problem, the fuel feed. It wasn't frozen, it was cut off. Someone had flipped the valve. She stared at the switch and her blood went cold. That wasn't an accident. That was sabotage. Ava's head snapped toward the hangar floor. The SEAL leader was behind a crate, firing in short bursts, keeping 3 smugglers pinned near the door. Another SEAL was reloading, hands slick with blood from his own wound. Nobody had time to touch the fuel valve, which meant someone else had. Someone already inside. Someone who knew the helicopter. Ava's gaze flicked toward the shadowed corner near the maintenance lockers. And there, half hidden behind hanging coats, was a figure she hadn't noticed before. Wearing hospital gear. Not a smuggler. Not a SEAL. A staff member, watching the chaos with a blank face. Ava's mouth went dry. In the cockpit, she could see the man's hands. One hand held a radio. The other held a pistol low at his thigh. He wasn't shaking, he wasn't scared. He looked like he'd been waiting for the storm all week. Ava's mind flashed back to one of the smugglers' voices earlier. They're not here for pills. They were here for a reason. A shipment, a prisoner, something hidden in the hospital. Ava realized with sick certainty, the storm didn't trap them by accident. It trapped them by design. She keyed the intercom, voice tight, barely a whisper. "Chief, we've got a traitor in the hangar." The SEAL leader's eyes snapped up toward the cockpit. Ava pointed just slightly. The traitor's pistol lifted. The muzzle aimed straight at her. And in that exact moment, the generator in the hospital finally died, plunging the entire base into darkness. The blackout hit like a punch. 1 second, the hangar had flickering emergency lights. The next, it was pure Arctic dark, broken only by muzzle flashes and the thin glow of the helicopter's dead dashboard. The traitor's pistol barked once, loud, sharp, and the round shattered the cockpit glass inches from Ava's cheek. She didn't scream. She dropped low in the seat, grabbed the mic, and said the calmest words she'd said all night. "He's shooting at the cockpit. He wants the bird grounded." That was all the SEAL leader needed. He didn't argue. He didn't ask questions. He turned and fired into the shadowed corner like he'd been born in it. The traitor ran, not toward the smugglers, not toward the exit. He ran toward the fuel controls because he wasn't trying to win a firefight. He was trying to stop escape. Ava saw him in the strobing flashes and her stomach twisted. This wasn't greed. This was a mission. The SEAL leader and one of the uninjured operators pushed hard, boots pounding, while the injured SEAL dragged himself forward on one knee, still aiming, still covering, refusing to die like the storm had already written his name. Ava climbed out of the cockpit, hit the hangar floor, and sprinted to the fuel valve. Her glove slipped on the metal. She yanked it open. The engine didn't start yet, but at least now it could. Then the smugglers did something that made the blood drain from every SEAL's face. They stopped firing. For 2 seconds, it was quiet. Just wind and breathing. And in that quiet, a voice echoed from the hospital corridor, smug and loud. "Bring the nurse out or we start with the patients." Ava froze. Dr. Harmon, Mara, the people upstairs. The smugglers had reached them. The SEAL leader's jaw tightened so hard it looked like it might crack. He glanced at Ava like he was about to tell her to stay put, but Ava was already moving. She didn't go toward the smugglers. She went back to the cockpit, because she understood the only real play left. Fly, or everybody dies. The traitor lunged from the shadows one last time, desperate, and grabbed Ava's parka collar from behind. She felt the gun press into her ribs. His breath was hot in her ear. "You don't get to leave," he hissed. Ava didn't fight like a nurse. She fought like someone who'd been taught how to end a problem fast. She stomped his foot, drove her elbow back into his throat, and twisted hard, using his grip against him. He stumbled. The pistol slipped. Before he could recover, the SEAL leader slammed into him like a freight train, pinned him to the concrete, and wrenched the weapon away. The traitor screamed, "You don't understand what's in that hospital!" The SEAL leader leaned close, eyes cold. "I don't care. You threatened civilians." Ava didn't wait for the rest. She climbed into the pilot seat and flipped switches with shaking fingers that refused to quit. Battery, fuel, starter. She breathed once, then again. The engine coughed, and this time it caught. Rough, ugly, but alive. The rotors began to turn. Slow at first, then faster, the sound building into something that felt like hope. The smugglers heard it too. They came running back toward the hangar, firing wildly into the dark, trying to kill the only thing that could lift anyone out of the storm. The SEALs formed a moving shield, firing, controlled bursts, dragging the 2 injured men toward the helicopter. One of the injured SEALs collapsed at the skid, and for a terrifying second, it looked like he wouldn't make it. Ava leaned out, grabbed his vest strap with both hands, and hauled, face red, teeth clenched, not stopping until he was inside. The liftoff wasn't cinematic. It was violent. The storm grabbed the helicopter like it hated it. The whole bird bucked and yawed, and Ava's arms burned as she fought the controls. Ice cracked off the windshield. Wind screamed through the frame. One of the SEALs yelled, "We're too heavy." Another yelled, "She's losing altitude." Ava didn't answer. She just flew. She flew by feel, by instinct, by a kind of muscle memory she never wanted back. She kept the nose into the wind, rode the turbulence like a wave, climbed inch by inch until the hangar lights became a faint blur below them. And then finally, the helicopter broke through the worst of the storm, and the sky opened just enough to show them the faint pale line of dawn. When they landed at the forward base, the world looked unreal. quiet snow, floodlights, medics rushing out, boots crunching, warm air spilling from open doors. Ava stepped down last, legs trembling like she'd run a marathon. The SEAL leader turned to her, and for the first time his voice softened. "You didn't just fly us out. You saved the whole damn hospital." Ava swallowed and tried to look away like she always did. But then a black SUV rolled up and a Navy admiral stepped out. Older, calm, the kind of presence that made even hardened men straighten without thinking. The admiral didn't look at the SEALs first. He looked straight at Ava. "Ava," he said quietly, like her name wasn't a surprise at all. The SEALs stared. The leader blinked. "Sir, you know her?" The admiral nodded once. "You were never assigned a rookie nurse for luck," he said. "She was here because I put her here." Ava's throat tightened. The admiral's voice didn't rise, but it hit like thunder. "For your protection, for this exact night." He paused, then added the twist that made every SEAL's face go pale. "And because she's my niece." Silence. Pure silence. The admiral's eyes softened just a fraction. "Her father was one of the greatest SEALs I ever served with. Afghanistan. He died so others could live." Ava stared at the snow, blinking hard, trying not to let the cold hide what her eyes were doing. The SEAL leader stepped forward slowly, like he was approaching something sacred. He didn't salute right away. He just said, low and rough, "Ma'am, I'm sorry for what I said in that hangar." Ava shook her head once. "You were scared," she whispered. "So was I." Then, one by one, all 5 SEALs stood straighter, injured, exhausted, still shaking, and saluted her. Not because she was family to an admiral, not because of her past, but because tonight, when the world shut down, she was the one who refused to let them die. Look, hours later, when the debriefing was done and the injured were stable, Ava found herself alone in a small room at the forward base. Just her. A cup of terrible coffee that had gone cold and the weight of everything that had happened. The door opened quietly. The SEAL leader stepped in, looking like he'd aged 10 years in one night. He sat down across from her without asking permission. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then he said, voice rough, "Your father. I served with him. Helmand Province, 2011. Ava's hands tightened around the cup. "He never talked about it," she said softly. "He wouldn't have," the SEAL replied. "Men like him. They carry it so others don't have to." Ava blinked hard. "He taught me to fly before he deployed. Said every soldier should know how to get themselves home." The SEAL leader nodded slowly. He was right. Another pause. Then Ava asked the question that had been burning in her chest all night. "The unit name," I said, "SEAL Team 9. You all went pale. Why?" The leader's jaw worked. "Because that unit existed for exactly 18 months. Off the books, high-risk insertions that couldn't be traced back. Your father ran it." Ava's breath caught. "When it disbanded," he continued, "every member was reassigned, scattered. Some retired. Some didn't make it home. But we all swore we'd never speak the name again." He looked at her directly now. "When you said it tonight, you weren't just dropping a unit number. You were speaking a language only family would know." Ava felt something break loose in her chest. All these years, she'd thought her father's training was just bonding, father-daughter time, but he'd been preparing her for nights exactly like this. "He knew, didn't he?" she whispered, "that I might need it someday." The SEAL leader's expression softened. "He knew that the world doesn't stop being dangerous just because you want it to, and he knew his daughter was strong enough to face it." 3 days later, Ava returned to St. Eldridge. The storm had passed. The sun was out, turning the snow into something almost beautiful. The hospital had been secured, the smugglers arrested, the traitor taken into custody. Dr. Harmon met her at the door. He looked smaller somehow, humbled. "Nurse Carter?" he he said quietly. I owe you an apology. Several, actually. Ava just nodded. She wasn't interested in making him grovel. Mara, the older nurse, pulled her into a tight hug that lasted longer than Ava expected. You saved us all, Mara whispered. You know that, right? Ava didn't know what to say to that, so she just hugged back. That night, alone in her quarters, Ava pulled out an old photo from her locker. Her father, in his dress uniform, smiling that quiet smile he had, the one that said he knew things he'd never tell. She traced the edge of the photo with her thumb. I get it now, Dad, she whispered to the empty room. Why you made me learn. Why you pushed so hard. She closed her eyes and let herself feel it all. The fear, the adrenaline, the weight of lives in her hands, the impossible choice between freezing and flying. And underneath all of it, something else. Something she hadn't expected. Pride. Not the loud kind, the quiet kind. The kind that comes from knowing you didn't break when everything said you should. Weeks later, a package arrived. No return address, just a military postal code. Inside was a flight patch. SEAL Team 9. Unofficial, never sanctioned, technically didn't exist. And a handwritten note in the SEAL leader's tight script. Your father would be proud. We all are. You flew us home when no one else could. That makes you one of us. Always. Ava pinned the patch to the inside of her locker, where no one else would see it. Because some honours aren't meant for display. They're meant to be carried quietly, the way her father carried his. The way she'd carry hers now. If you made it to the end, I need to ask you something. These stories about quiet heroes, the ones who don't wear capes, who don't get headlines, who just do what needs to be done when everyone else has given up. They only survive if people actually care enough to listen. If this moved you, even a little, hit subscribe. Leave a comment telling me where you're watching from. Have you ever been in a moment where everyone gave up but you had to stay calm anyway? Because stories like Ava's, they're everywhere. In hospitals, in storms, in moments when the world goes dark and someone has to be the light. And I want to keep telling them. Thanks for being here.